Okay, so Fáilte Rash go dtí an seminar ar líne le Shiliella. My name is Anya, and myself and Jacinta will be facilitating this evening's webinar. Shiliella is an anti-capitalist direct action group that is formed in the last year and that hopes to build a radical climate action movement on the island of Ireland. Decolonising the Planet, Building the World We Want to See is a webinar series that threads together intersectional and climate justice issues. And the idea of the series is to link together various struggles for liberation as a means of building solidarity and educating ourselves as a group. So the topic for this evening's discussion is feminist economics and the politics of care. And by centering care, we are rejecting the illusion, first of all, that we exist as individuals, separate from the land that feeds us and from the trees that regulate our oxygen so that we can breathe, and from the people and the communities that guide and support us through life. Shiliella believes in the power of self-organized communities to create the systems that we need. And these systems, these post-capitalist systems, need to also acknowledge these interdependencies and the centrality of care. So within the power systems of capitalism, of patriarchy, and of white supremacy, we have enslaved other human beings. We have colonized land, community, and minds, and we have convinced ourselves that life on this planet exists only to serve our own material needs. In Ireland, this land and its people were colonized, and yet today, through overconsumption, we are complicit in the colonization of lands all over the world. And this form of neocolonialism, which is central to capitalism's search for constant growth, sees the planet and all that lives there as resources to be exploited. So care is political. Care is historically gendered, and it includes work within and outside of the home. Work such as cleaning, housekeeping, childcare, elderly care, and sex work. And these forms of labour are almost always unpaid or underpaid and seem to exist outside of capitalism. But in fact, because they are reproducing human labour, which is known as social reproduction, they are actually integral to capitalism. So while this work is highly gendered, it is also really dependent on class and on race and on social capital. And while white Western feminism has affected change in corporate boardrooms and in industry, and maybe to a lesser degree in government, it is working class women and women from the global south that continue to bear the brunt of care work globally. So while COVID-19 laid bare the importance of care work and other forms of frontline labour, we witnessed what it looks like, what a society looks like that values care work. Of course, that could be argued, and you could say that, well, even in a global pandemic, this work was never valued, and if it were, then workers would be paid a salary that reflected that value on society. Or you would see, or you wouldn't see 2/3 of midwives and nurses using their annual leave to care for their children, as the INMO trade union announced last week. So there has been a shift in consciousness over the last few months, and more we are questioning just how socially useful many jobs are. Speaking of which, Ireland is so loyal to foreign direct investment and to our fellow neoliberal neighbours that we are considered globally as a corporate tax haven for the rich and the powerful. This economic strategy is based on serving the interests of multinational corporations by requesting minimal tax, while the work of caring, of feeding, of educating, and of housing human labour, as Connor mentions in his book, Money, is being pushed back onto the shoulders of ordinary people and women in particular. So we have a really long way to go, but through radical and through collective imagining that includes conversations such as this one this evening, and organised grassroots resistance, we can be part of building a post-capitalist future that we want to see. So fáilte móra go dtí ar cainteoirí agus an lucht féachana atá agin an nocht. I'm really looking forward to hearing from all of the different experiences and perspectives on this topic. And I think for me, this is a bit of a Pandora's box situation because there's just so much to say on this topic. And I really hope that these conversations can continue. So we'll have a slightly different format this evening. But just like last week, if you have a question for any of our speakers, then you can type them into the comment section under the video on YouTube, and we will try to get to them at the end. We'll stop accepting questions for the speakers after around 9 o'clock, so please try and get them in early. Our moderators reserve the right to delete offensive comments. We also have a very special performance by Julie from one half of Twin-Headed Wolf during and at the end of the webinar. So finally, to introduce our speakers this evening, we have Alice McLarnon and Teresa Martin from the Belfast Cleaning Society, which is the only cross-community cooperative in the North. And Alice also works in Trademark Belfast, which focuses on political education, anti-sectarianism in the workplace, cooperative development, as well as just transition for workers and working class communities. We also have activist, writer and researcher Conor McCabe. Conor has been a constant and decisive voice on issues relating to economic justice and austerity for many years, while advocating a feminist economics approach. Finally, with us this evening, we have Leticia Ortega, who will be speaking about childcare and the challenges of work-family balancing, while Anna Wolniak will be speaking about her experience as a migrant, precarious worker, mother of two and lecturer. So welcome everybody this evening. Okay, so if welcome to our speakers. Sorry about that. We are first going to hear from Alice McLarnon at the Belfast Cleaning Society.
Hello, everybody. Thanks very much for the invite. I'm really happy to talk to you tonight on this discussion. I have two hats on tonight. I am a full-time worker for Trademark Belfast, but I am also a founding member of the Belfast Cleaning Society. To find out about the Cleaning Society, you need to go back to the foundations and the work that was done prior for the co-op to be able to get up and running. In 2010, I work for Trademark, as I say, and as you introduced me, Trademark is a social justice organisation, and we're based on the Springfield Road interface, which, if anybody doesn't know Belfast very well, it's a 2.5 mile long, 60-foot wall that divides Protestant and the Catholic communities. It runs from the mountain right down into the city. And on one side you have the Loyalist community, and on the other side you have the Catholic community. And at the time in 2010, as you said, Trademark offered training, education. Part of our training was human rights and equality, anti-sectarianism, anti-racism, conflict resolution. We touched on political economy then, and it's just, you know, and we were working with women's groups on the Shankill Road and the Falls Road. And these are women from very poor working class areas, highly deprived areas. Noble indicators in the top 5 of the most deprived, socially injustice, social deprivation, you know, so many problems within the areas, high unemployment, high, you know, social problems from no facilities to serious illness. So these women's groups were from the Shankill and the Falls, and they had been completing the training course in human rights and equality. And then they went on to do anti-sectarian, anti-racism, and then they continued on. And like every funding body, they give you a wee pot of money, and then they say, okay, that's the end of the funding, so take yourself off. But these women did not want to take themselves off. These women wanted to go further, and they wanted to make something happen. And in 2011, we came to the end of the training through Trademark. And at the same time, Trademark were building on our cooperative development and working on our cooperative approach and helping co-ops set up. And we thought, well, why not go further and let's help these women set up as a co-op. Now, at the same time, these women were workers. They were carers in the community. They were carers in their family. Many of them were cleaners, highly professional cleaners, working in precarious jobs, getting less in the minimum wage sometimes, getting less in the contracted hours, told 1 week come in for 5 hours and the next week come in for 10 hours, and living on a pittance. And we thought, you have the skills. All you need is that wee bit of foundation and that help and support to help you build up. And then you can go further. And that's what the plan was. And I could go on and tell you the whole story about the MTV Awards coming to town and getting a phone call and asking, do you know a cleaning company, and going, hold on a wee minute, ringing a couple of women in the women's group. Here, girls, do you want to work in the MTV Awards? The women coming back and saying, bloody right we do. And that's how the co-op started. Our first contract was to clean in the MTV Awards after Lady Gaga and Justin Bieber. And it was just unreal. In 2012, we did a lot of work on foundation. We did a lot of work on setting up our business plan, setting up our rules and regulations, following the 7 principles of cooperation. And, how can we work together as a team? What the women wanted, who do they want to work for? How much are we able going to pay ourselves once we secure these contracts? So it was without the foundation work from Trademark, the support, the education and the backup, I don't think it would have been possible to get a group of women together right along the interface of West Belfast to do this. So not only was the work the Trademark was doing was knocking down walls, but it was also building up trust and building up employment and building up confidence within these women and within these women's groups. We can go on and talk later on about how Teresa's here today. Teresa's been a member for 6 years. We now have 12 women working. We won the Living Wage Employment Award in 2016 for all of Northern Ireland. We won't pay less than the real living wage. We try to make the work fit around the woman's life, because all women want to work, but we all have current responsibilities, whether it's family members, whether it's children. We have homes to run, and it's so hard to get childcare. It's so hard to get support. So we try to work it around that if the woman wants to work, well, let's find a contract that helps her to work, but doesn't cost her a fortune to try to get childcare, or it's not worth her while working. So we are running 9 years, 8 years legally. We're fully VAT registered, pay our corporation tax, pay all our PAYE and NIC. In March this year, we signed a £250,000 contract over 5 years, securing 5 jobs for 5 women. We are constantly working. We did not stop working during lockdown. We work in women's aid. We work in women's aid refuges. We couldn't let our customers down because they're frontline workers. So we went out and worked head to toe in PPE gear. We're constantly sourcing new work. So, we can continue on talking about this. And if there's anybody has any other questions, they need to ask me about it. I'm not going to say that it was all roses and champagne, because it definitely wasn't. It's hard work. But yeah, it's something that you build confidence in a woman. You build trust in people. When you're going into work every day and you know that you own your own business and that this is yours and you're doing this for yourself and for your co-workers, it is far more satisfying. And I remember having a talk one time, and I was talking to a room full of counsellors from Belfast, and I'd said, if every CEO and bank manager stopped working for the day or for the week, how would you know? But just imagine if every cleaner or carer stopped working for the week, and nobody worked in the hospitals cleaning, or in the home, or in schools, or on the streets. If a bin man stopped cleaning the streets, wouldn't you really notice it after a week? So that's what we try to empower the women when they're walking in a door to clean a building. Just remember that you are an essential service here, and what you're doing is very vital to keep the community going forward. So I don't know how many minutes I've left, because I'm afraid it's just, but I mean, if there's any questions, myself and Teresa are here to answer them. So happy to be here.
Thanks a lot for that, Alice. Yeah, that's so interesting, and it's that kind of, it was women, these communities that existed on both sides of the interface. There was high deprivation and unemployment, but that something like having that service or those trainings that Trademark offered could bring them together, and they could learn those skills and build that solidarity together, and that's brilliant. Yeah, I wish that there was more organizations like that, and yeah, I'm a big proponent and big believer in cooperatives, and especially worker cooperatives, so that workers have that autonomy over their lives in such a, yeah, in under capitalism that is so repressive in so many other ways. Yeah, so thanks for that.
Okay.
So then we'll just go over to Connor, and if you just want to chat to us a little bit around why you've been kind of drawn to the feminist economic lens in your work, and why you think that's useful when we're looking at working towards kind of transformative change.
Yeah, cool. I'll just get some slides up, just because I just find it easier to talk to slides than to talk there to notes. So just hope everyone can see these ones. So is that okay? Is that showing up? Yeah.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, perfect. Right. Yeah. So like one of the things that like this is pretty much kind of my kind of experience of kind of moving into kind of feminist economics, and why I think it's not just important, it's absolutely fundamental to any kind of understanding of kind of modern kind of capitalism. When we usually think of kind of, if there is such a thing as a mainstream leftist kind of analysis of kind of capitalism, it's kind of caught by some of these kind of writers here. You know, it's your Thomas Piketty or Harvey or, you know, Paul Krugman even, you know, and the view that of kind of capitalism that really kind of runs through these, and obviously I am kind of simplifying just a little bit, but not much though, is this kind of view of, you know, there are three broad areas of kind of capitalism. There's finance capital, there's industrial or services kind of capital, and then there's workers as well. And what happens is that paid kind of human labor pays for all the other two in terms of their profit-seeking kind of strategy. And it's very much a kind of patriarchal view of how things work. And it's not really how kind of capitalism works either. However, because this kind of setup has been kind of put forward, the mainstream left, for want of a better word, has kind of fallen into that trap then as well. So if you have a patriarchal view of what kind of capitalism is, you're going to get a leftist patriarchal response then as well. So where that kind of comes into play is in the institutional left, which in broad terms is like trade unions and parties. And then also there's the so-called vanguard parties. So the smaller kind of vanguard kind of left parties, who tend to do this thing where they're, in my view, they're constantly fighting and kind of refighting the Russian Revolution. And they're going from like vanguard party to kind of correct theory, and then they're going back again. But it's still kind of locked into it, that kind of patriarchal view of what kind of capitalism is and does. And what I mean by that is that all the stuff that Alice has been talking about is not really part of the analysis. And when it is brought into the analysis, it's brought in a very kind of patronizing way, as if like, you know, well, we'll bring in women's issues, but we'll bring them in to our kind of patriarchal view of like how kind of capitalism works, and how we should fight kind of capitalism from a leftist kind of perspective, which is pretty much at the workplace or in kind of parties as well. But there's a whole wealth of analysis coming from kind of gender studies and from race as well, that really kind of knocks that on the head. And there's a quote here from kind of like the subsistence perspective from 1999 that says that capitalism exploits more work and production kind of relations than just wage labor kind of relations. And what they're saying here is that it's not a case of that capitalism does other bad things apart from kind of workplace stuff. Capitalism cannot act or function as capitalism if it does not exploit non-wage labor work. And that's mainly care work, and it's mainly kind of gendered in our culture. So this is kind of gendered work that is socially necessary, but is usually unpaid. And if it isn't, as Agala said, if that work isn't done, you notice. And we saw that during COVID-19. If there was ever an example of how fundamental care and unpaid care is to how things work, even in a kind of capitalist kind of society, we've seen it play out in like real time over the last kind of 3-4 months. So this is where I think there's a much more richer stream of analysis and ideas, and it's coming from a very broad term of kind of feminist economics and social reproduction studies that brings in class and gender and race as well. And what they're saying here again, and just to kind of on the point of like boring people, but just to kind of restate it, none of these writers are saying that we should, to be fair, bring in women's issues or bring in race issues just to be nice to these. They're saying you do not understand how capitalism works if you do not see the gendered and race nature of how of a kind of capitalist system. It's a blind spot. So just going back, this is a blind spot that's shared here, and it's shared. And this is just from my own kind of study. So I'm just talking from my own kind of journey here. That when I kind of looked at how kind of capitalism worked in Ireland, I learned more from these writers than I ever did from the other bunch. And I think that's important to like say that this is not a case of, you know, bringing these in. You cannot understand kind of capitalism if you do not look at it through a gendered and like rents, you know, it's gendered and race kind of dynamics as well. So the image that is usually done is of the capitalist kind of iceberg, where you have, you know, kind of wage labor and kind of products and services that's observed in terms of mainstream kind of analysis. But then there's all the other stuff, again, going back like to Alice's kind of point, stuff that is socially necessary. Things will just collapse if it isn't done, but it's not factored into how capitalism works, because all the focus is on the profit motive. But capitalism is exploitive. It needs to exploit as much non-paid labor as it does paid labor. A brilliant kind of summary of these arguments came out there last year in Feminism for the 99%. It's a very short book, but they really kind of capture where these kind of, you know, ideas are coming from. So they say in it that as feminists, we appreciate that capitalism is not just an economic system, but it's something larger. It's an institutionalized social order that also encompasses the apparently non-economic relations that and practices that sustain the official economy. Behind capitalism's official institutions of wage labor and production, exchange, and finance, those three bubbles that I showed earlier on, stands there necessary supports and enabling conditions. And for a short line, it really punches a lot. It's really saying that you can't understand the first part of the sentence without kind of looking at the next part as well. 1 minute, is it? Oh my God. Okay. And that's why capitalism is wrong. No. So just this line here, Dennis, that they mention all the areas here. There's families, but communities, nature, unpaid labor, and the work of social reproduction still performed largely by women and often uncompensated. These two are constitutive elements of capitalist society and sites of struggle there in it. So to kind of sum up, that what they're saying is that not only are these key to how kind of capitalism works, they also open up opportunities for activists to actually getting back at kind of capitalism. So that far from that kind of patronizing, paternalistic view of care work as if, well, we should kind of bring up because it's a nice thing to do. What they're saying here, and I completely kind of agree with this, is that this is the weak underbelly of kind of capitalism. If you organize here, you will hit it and like hit it hard. So even from an activist kind of point of view, it is crucial to look at things like social reproduction and care, because it cannot function without these things. So if it's organized in these areas, if you get rid of this, we can move then more towards this type of thing as well. So for me then, just to kind of finish up on what kind of feminist economics and kind of social reproduction studies brings is that it brings those blind spots that the more kind of patriarchal kind of leftist views leave out. And it gives us a more kind of whole kind of view of how kind of capitalism works, where it's strong, and very importantly, where it's weak. That's it. Okay.
Great, thanks, Connor. Yeah, and I think they're both really useful kind of framings for the discussion, and we'll get into more of a discussion with all the speakers after this, but we'll just have a little musical interlude first of all. So yeah, we'll have Julie, and thanks so much for joining us. As we said, she's one half of Twin-Headed Wolf, who take their inspiration from, well, some of their inspiration from folklore and mythology and the fairy folk. And yeah, I don't know how they describe their music, but I describe it as kind of otherworldly folk. So I think it's really appropriate music in these kind of, when we're talking about kind of different worlds and different ways of being. So thanks, Julie.
Hello, or rather,
hello.
The first song I'm gonna sing is not my song, it's by Timber Timber, and it's called Demon Host. And when I heard the title of the conference, I just figured it was a good path to follow, because it's kind of like capitalism and patriarchy are the demon and society is the host. But it's beautiful, so. Oh, 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 oh. Death, she must have been your will, born beneath the reaper's veil. With your voice my belly sung, I began to feel so drunk. Candle, candle on my clock, Lord, I must have heard you knock me out of bed as the flames licked round my head and my lungs filled up black in that tiny little shed. It was real and I repent all the messages you sent. Clear as day, but in the night, oh, I could not get it right. Oh, 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 oh. Oh, 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 oh. Oh, oh. Here is the church and here is the steeple. Open the doors, there are the people. All their little hearts at ease for another week's disease. Eagle, eagle, talon scream. I was never in between. I was on the fence. Never wanted your 2 cents down my throat into the pit with my head upon a spit. Reverend, please, can I chew your ear? I've become what I most fear. I know there's no such thing as ghosts, but I have seen the demon host. Oh, 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 oh. Oh, 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 oh. Whoa. Whoa. That she must have been your will, a bone beneath the reaper's veil. With your voice my belly sung, I began to feel so drunk. Candle, candle on my clock, Lord, I must have heard you knock me out of bed as the flames licked around my head and my lungs filled up black in that tiny little shack. It was real and I repent all the messages you sent. Clear as day, but in the night, oh, I could not get it right. Oh, 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 oh. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for that. That was great. Beautiful tunes. And yeah, so very apt for the conversation we're having tonight. So thanks for that. And yeah, some really good points there, Connor. Yeah, I don't even know where to start, but like, yeah, I mean, I think when I read Silvia Federici, I think that was, for me, that was the point where it just kind of blew everything out of the water, and just seeing that history being retold from a perspective that's not just from a very westernized male perspective. It was just like incredibly powerful, and retelling the stories of the witch hunts and the common land that was enclosed and all of that. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up. So we actually have we might move into some discussion points now. So we'd love to hear from everyone else that is with us this evening. So our first question is around, I suppose, society and COVID-19. So the pandemic has been compared to an X-ray machine for society, highlighting the cracks and the weaknesses in the system left by the failing of capitalism. How is childcare and parenting affected, or the care for the elderly and other care roles that are underappreciated in a profit-driven society? So if it's okay with Leticia and Anna, maybe we might go to you first.
Yeah, I think the way we kind of organize it is having an informal discussion about it. We're obviously not experts. We just, as you said, it's a huge topic. We are not going to cover anything we want to, but the idea is we would like to continue with these discussions, to keep happening. So
we might just want to open a discussion, touch on a few issues, share our personal experience, and by no means we're not going to provide any kind of sociological analysis of what's happened, and in the care sector.
With your question, well, I think during the start of the pandemic, there were a very clear understanding that who were really the frontline workers and who were really essential in our society. And a lot of them were extremely precarious for so many times. There are people on the care sector, healthcare sector, supermarkets, cleaners, childcare workers. And at the same time that was value, how important this job is. I mean, under capitalism, care has been a commodity, as everything is under a commodity. And care who has been profitable, like childcare, nursing homes, hospitals, it continues to be precarious. And then a lot of work that is not that they didn't make profit out of it is just been invisible, which is parenting, And my experience as a parent who also work outside home is being that my company, my organization where I work with, didn't acknowledge that nobody in the team meetings that we have every Monday had children, that we have Zoom classes and teachers, and the creche didn't acknowledge that we also had to work and we couldn't be in a Zoom meeting with our toddlers. I have a 4-year-old son. We also did a meeting doing crafts and things with him. And that is kind of like the iceberg that Connor was talking about, and we're all there and those invisible. And that's the idea, because the provision of care is not valued in our society, and when it's not a profit made of,
it's quite interesting. What I can say, it's for me, it's also so care has been invisible for so many years. It has been kind of taken for granted. There is an assumption that care is somewhere there, somebody takes care of someone, but actually what is profitable, what is important is the work for money. So that's it. And of course, the experience was quite like difficult and hard for many people. Like for me, like there was a kind of positive note in this pandemic experience, because suddenly care has been actually made visible to some extent in some parts. So, for example, you know, we all watch this kind of short films where BBC presenter, you know, suddenly the children entered the room and so on. And then everyone in the world could see that, oh, wow, actually working people do have children, you know, so what do we do now, you know?
Men.
You
know, it's kind of interesting that there is this kind of jokes, no, that said during the pandemic, saying, oh, men, since the lockdown, some men have learned the name of their children, you know, and it is a joke, but there is a lot of truth on it too, because I think a lot of men has realized the amount of work there is at home for some people, that their job has been invisible. And it happens that when women have work outside at home, they also have that invisible work, and they double work, because it's been research proven that women have this amount of invisible work that we're being taken for granted because of patriarchy and gender roles and construction, you know, of socially constructed, that we think that women are being learned to be carers, you know. And that is I thought you were going to say that the positive thing of the pandemic was not paying for childcare, saving money, because that is another issue of how expensive it is, and how not just expensive, it's also like a privilege for some people to even afford to have pay for childcare. And that means there is a huge amount of women who live in precarity as a cause of that, especially lone parents and everything who is outside a nuclear family, you know.
I think we'll discuss this like later on, but like we already noticed two positives, and then there is third positive that actually like the most difficult, as many people notice, like as actually Alice has mentioned, like when we look at flexibility was a word associated with the employer, you know, like you need to be flexible as a waiter, what means that you need to adjust to the employer's needs, you know. So you're working like when and if like precarious on a precarious contracts, or kind of like different types of this kind of contracts. But the thing is that how I see it, that like the employers should be, they are not flexible to the needs of the parents. This is invisible. Like, you know, you can actually leave your job very often unattended, but you cannot leave like a 2-year-old unattended. That's the truth. That's the reality, you know. But so why the employees should be flexible, not the employers, what Alice has mentioned. It's like, it's a fantastic concept that the work should be a kind of weaved around the needs of the people, not the other way around.
Yeah, and if, as Anya, you were saying at the beginning that it was a lot of women had to take annual leave, you know, in order to take care of their children. And if that's not, that's been my case, but even if it's if your child is sick, they're letting you to go home to pick up your child, like giving you a favor. It's like Connor was saying, it's like it was a nice thing to do rather than a right that actually you are earned because you are caring for someone in a society, but it's not, it's completely taken for granted, you know. And that is a punishment that women are facing. And this is one of the main reasons that why women are not up in management and are not in taking big positions, because you are being punished as by your employer when you're taking annual leave, when you're taking, when you have to go late because your child is sick, because you have to come late because your child have a tantrum before going to school, and many, many reasons. And that means your performance is poor and you won't progress. And that is a lot of reasons why even in all the kind of sectors, men will be in management positions, you know. And
it's actually very interesting that it's called motherhood punishment. So in many sectors, like women who when they become mothers or mothers, they actually earn less than childless women or child-free women. But it's just the opposite with regard to fathers. Fathers actually earn more than childless people. So it's quite interesting, you know, that what does it say about the situation? Again, it's just a signal which points towards the fact that care is invisible, because
even now during COVID-19 today, I just saw this article, they're discussing how kids are going to back to school, how it's going to happen. How are people going to work full time, manage this? I mean, that's not even part of the debate. It has to be our individual responsibility as part of neoliberalism to pick up someone to mind our children. Like, that's our responsibility as because choosing to have a child. And that is ridiculous that nowadays discussing, like, obviously, if the children are not going to back to school, people cannot return to back to full time.
Yes, there is no, absolutely.
And there is not even a discussion about that,
about that.
And that is part how invisible and how little knowledge they have. And like, that's actually it's going to have issues mainly also on women, mostly. Like, I know Spanish research, in Ireland there is no such a research because there is a different type of society coming with the Catholic Church, and the Constitution, where 6 of 10 women in Spain are giving up their careers, even they don't want to. They're feeling forced to giving up their careers because they cannot balance their life as parents and having a job. And that is now as just because of COVID-19. A lot of mostly women have to give up their careers because of the crisis, because they can continuously to do both, which that means some of them will be living precarious, some of them are privileged enough to do it. A lot of them, they can't even have the choice. When on the other hand, men, only a 6% of men are giving up to progress in the career, not to give up their career, which is 10 times less than a woman,
And yeah, and maybe to talk a little bit around, I suppose, this shift in what an essential worker is as well. And I'm wondering what Ali and Teresa's experience has been now. I suppose you've always known that being a cleaner is an essential worker, but it's like the rest of society is waking up to that. And so wondering what's that experience been to see that kind of essential work, at least in a kind of tokenistic way, be valued, and is there space, I suppose, the space that gives now to widen that conversation about what's the work that we need and what work we should value.
Hopefully.
I don't know if Teresa wants to chip in here at any point. Teresa, feel free. What we found during the lockdown and the whole how essential our work was, well, we were getting calls, please do not stop the service. We understand if you're worried about your staff and for their health and safety because of COVID-19. So what we did is we met as members, said we're going to continue on cleaning certain areas, key frontline service areas that we would not let down. Now, half of our customers closed down during the pandemic because they were office based, so they were all working from home. There was no need for cleaning. But the other half needed extra. We clean up in Clonmel housing, which is housing complexes, some for disabled people, some for people who have long-term problems, and we do the communal areas. We had 5 extra buildings on during COVID-19 because they had sent their workers home due to COVID-19, and they brought in an outside service, which was us, which was fine. So we found it that we had to make sure that the workers were happy, the members were happy to go into the workplace. We had covered ourselves with the proper PPE gear. We were going in like space invaders because we were covered from head to toe. We wouldn't let anybody down, but we also completely understood that other members could not go out to work, and they had to shield. And we supported that. We went, okay, you need to shield. Other members stepped in and covered their hours, covered their jobs if anybody had any problem. Now, that would not happen in another workplace. That wouldn't happen in a normal job, as Letitia's saying about, you have to go to work, you have to work from home. A lot of the mothers that work with us and the women that work with us have children, have current responsibilities. Their children were off school. So therefore, getting to their jobs when they used to work school hours, their kids were no longer at school. And they were going, what are we going to do? And we tried to work collectively together to find answers to any of their problems. And if they couldn't go to work at a certain time, we changed the times of working when they could go to work. if anything happens to anybody while they're in work, if their child took sick or anything, Letitia, this is especially an answer for you. If someone rang us up and said, I've just got a phone call from the nurse and my neighbour or somebody, the child's not well, our answer to that would be, put your stuff away, go on home, the offices can get clean tomorrow. Because people are far more important to us. We will do the job, we will get the job done professionally, we are a professional company, but the person who is under a lot of stress and worry and has a current responsibility as well as a job needs to be supported, and we try our best to do that. Or another worker would step in and go, I'll go down, let her go home, she has to go and sort something out. During the pandemic, it was very stressful for us. It was stressful because we had additional work on, we had a shorter, smaller team. But we did it, and we did it collectively as a cooperative. And we wouldn't have anybody worrying or concerned or anxious going into any building. You know, that was our point of view. But I thought it was an absolute disgrace that so many frontline workers did not have support where childcare was concerned. We have a member who is also a frontline worker who works in a care home. Now, she does not have any care responsibilities, but she had to fill in extra shifts because some of the workers in the care home had no childcare and couldn't come in to work in the care home to look after people with COVID-19.
Yeah,
so this is what we've seen with our own eyes, and she was doing double shifts and extra shifts because of people who couldn't get childcare. We had other people who were saying, my husband's hours are changed, he can't help me during the afternoon, I need to go a certain time. And we worked around that and said, okay, let's change the time so that you can still go to your job, happy to get to your job, but you're not being under pressure or putting under pressure with childcare. So we've seen it wide open. Society seen, I think the lid came off it to show what really runs society. And society is run by workers who are carers, cleaners, shop workers, nurses, bin delivery men. That is what runs society. That's what keeps the communities going. I've never seen so much cooperation that I have seen this last 4 months of communities coming together to help people who have to be shielded, bringing food parcels, going to shop for them, picking up their medication, communities coming together when they needed to help the nurses, help with childcare, help with PPE gear. I haven't seen so many people sitting in their own homes making masks for frontline workers. And that is cooperation in action, and that's communities in action, and that is the future. That's the way it should be. It should be that these are the most important things. Not your capitalist system, not your entrepreneurs, not let's buy 10 iPhones this year. Who the fuck needs 10 iPhones? You know, let's go back to reality here and what really makes society run, and it's the working class people.
Yeah.
My rant is over.
Just before we run on to the next question, sorry. Does Teresa want to come in there? And is there anything that you'd like to add? Or?
It's just basically everything that Alice has said. You know, the co-op. It's a job, but we're a family and a community together. We do help each other. The great thing about it working in a co-op is knowing that everybody's on an equal structure. There's no hierarchy. You know, we all work together for each other, and we are flexi. And because we are that way, we can go out and help the girls, or if somebody is sick. You know, it's not a case of, oh God, I have to phone the boss and tell the boss I can't come into work, my child's sick. We know that we're going to be there to help each other. So there's never any question about that. We'll go in, we'll do the job, we'll help the girls that's there, we'll cover their shifts as far as we can do it. Because, you know, you're working with each other for each other. It's not some big boss sitting at the top office, but, you know, we're making money for him. We're making money for each other to survive with each other. And that's the way I see it. And I think that it should, as Alice said, the community played a role as a cooperative within themselves with helping each other.
Yeah. Thanks very much for that. So we're just going to move on to the next question. I'm so sorry. We'll have a bit of time at the end for people to come back in. So the next question is around, I suppose, the nuclear family, and it's more like care within the home. But in an interview for Women's Own magazine in 1987, Margaret Thatcher famously remarked that there is no such thing as society. There are only individual men and women, and there are their families. So how does neoliberal capitalism's focus on the nuclear family affect our capacity to build community and solidarity?
Who is starting?
Who wants to come in there?
Who wants to start?
Connor, do you want to come in there? Or
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, it's very, very interesting because I see it as a kind of paradox, really. Okay, because like nuclear family is definitely the outcome of neoliberalism, or it's the consequence of neoliberalism. You know, the family needs to be kind of flexible, need to move around after job and so on. The father goes to work, the mother stays at home caring for children and so on and so on. And it was fine, like, let's say fine in the 50s. But then the situation changed, and then as it turned around, the inequality has grown, and now it's actually in Dublin, it's impossible to live on only one income. So the same is in America and so on, so on. Middle class has lost the ability to survive on one salary and still have a kind of middle class life. And now it turned out that, you know, both parents are needed for work. So what do we do now, you know? And then it somehow assumes that that nuclear family is the foundation of the society, okay? But then it forgets about the help needed in this family, with what help is actually like bought, or it's kind of like the extended family is used, and so on and so on. So this whole thing is completely invisible. And it's quite interesting because there is actually a kind of hierarchy of care. And you can see it like everywhere. You can see it in childcare, you can see it in elderly care, and so on. So at the top, like, let's say there are families, quite rich families, who can buy this kind of extension, this help, like from other people, you know. So you can have au pairs leaving, like very precarious workers leaving, or living in help, or like, you know, nannies, all of this, you know. And these workers expect to adjust to the family needs, and so on and so on. But then you have, like in Ireland, you have middle class families who can't actually afford this kind of luxury lifestyle. So, but still women want to work, but then we need to recognize that women in Ireland, especially women, want to work and are in this privileged position that they can actually work, because they can afford childcare. How much is that right now, the full-time childcare?
Private childcare, which is crash, which is fine to work, can be €1,000 a month. I mean, when you are nuclear families, excluding a lot of different types of family who cannot, who are going to condemn to live in a precarious way, you know, which is lone parents, migrant people, people with very precarious work. In Ireland, it's very complex when you talk about the neoliberal family and the feminist approach, because you were mentioned Silvia Federici, you know, which I love, and all these feminists in the 70s and the 60s and the 80s came with the idea of wage work and housework, when in Ireland, because it was always in the Irish Constitution and the Catholic Church, will have something where women should stay at home, and the man, which is the father and the breadwinner, has to be working. And now versus a neoliberal point of view where women are free to go to the market, but it's not really such a thing as a freedom, you know.
It's not a choice, really. It's
yeah. And then, as she said, it becomes a precarity, because I can't think about even I'm privileged enough to put my child to crash. I'm always thinking, I'm obviously not privileged enough to know to be working at home. I always thinking that, isn't it crazy, this capitalist system that every day I think that I put my child 9 hours to crash, to be minded by another woman who probably have children, minded by someone else who cannot afford a crash because they are very precarious workers, and a crash is something very expensive. There is something wrong in our society when that's the case. When my child is being minded 9 hours by another woman who is also probably have children minded by someone else, and that creates a precarity. And that's when race and class comes to it, you know, because when I was looking for a childminder, I have mainly non-Europeans, Brazilians, as offering €5 an hour. When I was like, no. And there are people who will pay them that, because also their own precarity, and it's a chain, you know, where and that's what happened when care is no valued, when there is no basic income, when there is, and it's so intersectional, you know, and that is something that Ireland is very strange, because Ireland is made for women not to work by the constitution, because it's the Catholic background, and that's why Ireland is the worst place in Europe where childcare is more expensive in the European Union. But at the same time, you cannot live with one salary anymore. So see, as Anna was saying, you need 2 salaries in order to survive and buy a mortgage and pay a mortgage and have children and don't live in a precarious way, you know? And it just doesn't make sense, because then that's when childcare is not nationalist and it's a profit, you know?
So it's a kind of like a paradoxical thing of false choice. It's presented as a choice. You can stay at home or you can go to work, but it's not a choice. Like, it's not a choice for lone mothers, of course. It's not a choice for people working in minimum wage, because it doesn't make sense, you know, to get 10 euro for your work and then to pay 10 euro for childcare. But it is present. At the same time, like, it is a system in which we are all valued on the basis of our kind of paid work, but then it excludes certain families and certain, like, not nuclear families, so like lone parents, because they cannot, literally speaking, afford to work.
Yeah.
They cannot afford to work while they work at home. It's not recognized. So they are completely, you know.
Yeah, like the women I know in working class communities that my clients, I'm an addiction practitioner, and they work mostly as cleaners or sex workers, and if they have childcare, it is because they have family here. And then if you are a migrant, then it's when you're going to have all this level of precarious, you know, and that's where race comes in, and this is where it's very complex, you know. And if Alice is lucky to have this amazing cooperation, you know, but if the here in Dublin, if you don't have a co-op and you're a cleaner and you don't have family nearby to mind your children, you're fucked.
Yeah, you need that community around you. That's really important.
And that means you live to be poor for the rest of your life.
Yes,
you know.
Yeah. You're considered as a person who is not contributing, therefore you don't deserve to get whatever state pension, whatever, you know, because you don't collect this PSI and so on. So you are in fact excluded from the whole system, just because, like, the very basic, the most important job is not really recognized.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of that expression that, you know, it takes a village to raise a child, and how that's obviously a very old expression, but how through capitalism, we have made this nuclear families and these little units to do all of this care work of raising children and of all that social reproduction work, but it's been contained now in these little nuclear families. And the nuclear family, in some ways at least, are just kind of an expression of individualism. So it's like Margaret Thatcher said, it's what's important is yourself, and what's secondary important to yourself is the people around you that you've created, or the people, or these little units, which is kind of the antithesis of building community and having solidarity and you know, making those connections across outside of your family units.
Yeah.
Does anybody else want to come in there just before we're running a little bit behind time? But
just a little thing about what you were saying, Anya, just a little bit. We wanted to add that I talk to so many of my friends, mostly migrants, you know, because they don't have the families here, and because you were saying of neoliberalism and individualism. My experience, and I know Anna's experience, and my friend now who is having a baby of maternity leave, is horrible. It's extremely isolation. It's a huge alienation, because there is a women should not have a race by their own, you know, and having a baby when there is no any provide. I know there are parent groups, but sometimes it's 10 o'clock and you cannot make it, and it's a really difficult experience, and it's a difficult experience because you're alone by yourself with that baby, and that's not how you should raise a baby.
Yeah. And actually, there is also a good research done in Ireland. It was from 1994, but what it says that staying at home mother is twice as likely to experience psychological distress than working mother, twice as likely.
that's because of the neoliberalism and how isolation it is and how individualism it is, including parenting, you know. Parenting should be, as you said, as a tribe, as a collective, not individualistic way, you know.
Sounds like there should be a mother's care cooperative down there.
I was just thinking that.
My
Yeah.
mom is a cleaner, Alice. But
Yeah, I think even a childcare, and it should be all mothers. Yeah, trying to give me a call.
She would love it to join.
Yeah.
That would be a good cooperative to start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We care. Mothers care. All mothers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually a care worker in a university setting, and yeah, social co-ops are really big in like Italy and in Canada, and I always think that like I don't think people realize just how privatized these services are. Like they're just across the board, these services are done on a for-profit basis, which have huge implications for the workers, but have huge implications for, I work with people with disabilities, and you know, it's absolutely, the opposite of this kind of autonomous way of organizing where people have a say in their everyday lives. So yeah, like, I mean, I'm preaching, but like, yeah, social cooperative would be brilliant, really. Connor, do you want to come in there? Yep.
Yeah, just kind of the two small points, just to kind of back up what kind of Anna and Letitia and Alice have been saying. Like just my own kind of research, and this is all that I can really bring to the table here, but just on my own kind of research, one of the reasons, it isn't the only, but like one of the reasons why there's a problem with care kind of costs here, it's the business model of it, as you know, as has been said. There's a move now for very highly leveraged companies to move in and set up kind of home care, care homes, childcare, the creches as well. So the prices are being set not by the cost of the service, but by the need to pay back those loans and that leverage, and also pay for the very high, you know, kind of dividends and wages that are being put forward from like fund management. So when Alice and Teresa, you know, say there about setting up a kind of co-op childcare thing, it would do what the Belfast kind of cleaning company has done. It takes that leveraged element out of the cost. It takes the management out of the like cost, and that's frightening for kind of capitalism, because then it shows that, oh shit, there really is no need for like multinational finance firms to come in and get their 3% kind of dividend, and there really is no, you know, kind of no need for your Dennis O'Brien type kind of Uber, you know, kind of Superman flying in and saving the world through testosterone alone. It's kind of like fair play to his lads. But then it gets into the kind of politics of it, and again, kind of Alice, you know, she know this from Trademark. There's a different legal system there, obviously, in the South and the North, and there is fierce resistance to bring in legislation in the South that would actually allow people to set up co-ops. Last year, Claire Daly, TD, who's now an MEP, she put forward a bill that was written by kind of Rona kind of McCord, that would allow a co-op to be set up with 3 members, which is the normal. If it's 2, it's a partnership. If it's 4, it's a company. So with 3 members, you set up a co-op, and it was blocked. Fianna Fáil and like Fine Gael just would not kind of let it through. So, you know, even in terms of the kind of state kind of supports, which is what I would look at, which is where I kind of, you know, kind of spend my kind of time kind of looking at, I can see that fierce kind of resistance from kind of Irish kind of capitalism to do anything that what kind of Alice and Teresa are doing in Belfast because it works. And then suddenly, why do you do kind of all these things? And then just my last point on it is that, like, as has been pointed out here, these are genuine counter-capitalist structures. Like, you know, it's where that kind of, you know, I think that we need to be a lot sharper as to what capitalism is and what it isn't, and what work is and what capitalist work is, you know, and what making money to keep yourself alive and have a good kind of living is different from that profit-seeking, money begets money kind of a system in kind of capitalism, you know. So you can have work, you can have a kind of co-op kind of company. It does not mean that because people are working and that there's profit made, that it's suddenly capitalist. It's not. Because it is, as Teresa said, it's like the people work for themselves. That's the motivation. It isn't about kind of making more money for kind of money sense. Now, it could still be exploitative, but it's not a capitalist form of kind of exploitation.
Yeah, there was
no
appropriation of the profit
Exactly. But you know, absolutely. And I think that that's one of the reasons why, at a kind of legislative level, because what I would kind of look at, there is massive resistance.
Yeah, I have like one interesting story about this, like very short, about nursing homes. I have a friend who is like a precarious worker in nursing home. And migrant, of course. And then she was asked during the pandemic to actually move into the nursing homes. Like she was ordered to move into the nursing homes because they couldn't because they were afraid of the infections and so on. So they knew that they are paying so little that the workers are sharing household with 10 other people. So they asked them to move into the nursing home so that they would be isolated from so.
Yeah. And like, you know,
that comes to housing, which is a huge problem.
And and just like following on, or like just to give kind of more evidence, but your point there on it, I mean, 65% of deaths have been in kind of nursing homes. It's off the scale in terms of what's happening all across Europe. And like they will not look at it.
It's the main problem. The privatization of it is the main problem. It's the same exactly in Madrid, when nursing homes were completely privatized and they were precarious and they were not taking care. And that's what happened, with COVID-19. You see the results of it,
Yeah, I mean, 10 years ago, 80% of all nursing homes in the South were public. It's now, just in 10 years, 80% are now private. It's been flipped in just like 10 years. And that was a Fine Gael kind of government just doing that. And because it's seen as care and home care, where was the left on this, Because, it's that kind of blind spot. Just going back to the kind of earlier point about, well, that's not really, it's the workplace and kind of trade unions, that's where the real kind of struggle happens. Well, fuck off, lads. I mean, this is what's happening.
There's something like so sinister about that. I mean, that flip has happened. Like these are workplaces that are, it's social care. It's about, it's working with people that are quite marginalized already, and to privatize that, to make that so that it's done on a for-profit basis is like, it makes no sense.
And if it's not privatized, I come from the community drug work, where we are funding, where austerity destroy us, and we are very afraid that will be the first services to cut as well, because that will happen before, and if austerity measure will come with the same party that it was 10 years ago, is very likely. So if it's not privatized, and it's community funding, the funding stops, and there's massive costs to that too,
Yeah. So
Connor wants to say something.
Just one last point, whatever. Like the head, the former head of HICWA, the chair of HICWA, which was the oversight body for nursing homes in Ireland, was working outside of HICWA as a lobbyist for private nursing homes. He came into the Public Accounts Committee in the Dáil about kind of 3 years ago, and it's stunning. Like he just brazened it out. but like he was caught in a meeting where minutes were taken and then leaked, where they were saying that we're going to actually go on strike, this is the nursing homes, and start turfing out old people to force the like government to give us kind of better terms.
Yeah.
But in the meeting, a lawyer then steps in and says, you can't really do that, lads. That's a cartel and that's illegal, you know. But like the minutes were there for it. And the guy who was at the meeting, he was part of the oversight body. He was at this meeting, knew all of this because he was a lobbyist then for it, informing them that this might happen. And that gives you a sense of like, that's what we're dealing with here, you know, in terms of how care is just being
Sorry, Connell, to interrupt you, but I was always wondering, I read somewhere the Ireland, there is a research, the Ireland has the highest percentage of older people in nursing homes, like over 65 and especially over 85. And it's the highest in Europe. And I was always like wondering, why is that? Like, I couldn't find the answer in any of the papers, you know, like I would assume that it would be just the opposite because of conservative culture, Catholic, but it's like, you know, it's the highest. So it's really, yeah, so that might be the answer. Like
it is, it's a captive, you know, it's to force more people into it. Same as kind of direct provision, which is turned into a moneymaker. Yeah. It's like, you know, they've monetized refugees. They sat down in like 2000 saying, how will we monetize refugees? And how they did it was through kind of direct provision. And that's the way, like something like how many billions have been spent in the last 20 years on it?
And they're minors, like refugee minors, asylum seekers who are minors, and they're minors, they are privatized, their care, the social care settings. It's children with no family, the most vulnerable people who come from other countries with us children, and that's privatized, you know. What's the level of care, you know?
Just to come in, like last week we had Masai, we had Lucky from Masai, and we had Kate from Sway. And I mean, yeah, this is totally relevant to this conversation because, well, first of all, there's so many women in direct provision that are being pushed into sex work as a way to top up, to pay for the different costs that obviously they can't pay for with the allowance that they get from the state. And there's also a lot of women in direct provision that are carers, and this is work that they do. And yet, when the COVID allowance that was introduced at the start of the pandemic, they aren't actually entitled to that payment. So it's just these black holes that it's labour and it isn't labour, and it doesn't really count. But I'm sorry, I've had the last word on that, of course, because I'm the privilege. But the last, just to move on to the final question, I'm so sorry to cut that short because it was so interesting. But I suppose just the last question we wanted to think about is, I suppose, the future and what would a post-capitalist society, post-capitalist world that's centered in ethics of care look like? I'm sure that would be, I don't know if Teresa or Alice want to come in there, because I'm sure cooperatives would be part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Cooperatives are overseen in every council throughout of Ireland. It's all social enterprises now. It's like, let's start up a social enterprise, and the social enterprise then has a board of directors on the top, and they tell the workers what to do, and you know, they have to hit their social ethos and social clauses and all. No, go the cooperative route. You know, I think that education is key. Let people know what a cooperative is, how a cooperative runs, how you can set up a business.
Education for cooperatives should start in schools when they're doing their studies. And they're teaching kids about, they should show them, well, this is an alternative. Cooperatives are an alternative to an entrepreneur. Let them teach it from school age, so they're growing up with that knowledge that it's already what they can do, not just teach it, learn about it as an adult or come across it as an adult. Learn it from a young age, educate the children.
Yeah. 100%. The only problem is that we have to go to the academia and say, okay, let's get a module set up here so that we can win those schools. And we also have to go to the councils and the government to say, this should be on the agenda, this should be talked about, this should be looked into. You can see how much cooperative communities came together during COVID-19, during the pandemic, during the shutdown. Our elderly were being cared for, our people who were shielding were being cared for, even our frontline workers were being supported and cared for. You can see what society and communities can do when they come together. Now let's educate everybody about the cooperative approach and what way it should be going forward. There should be better facilities in place where it comes to childcare, support of women getting back into work. There should be after schools clubs paid for by government. It shouldn't be something that a woman has to take out of her pocket. It should be a service that's there and set up, and it should be there for everybody to access to, not just the wealthy, but working class women. During the pandemic, working class women who lost their childcare, lost the school, lost the after schools. You're going back to the Irish family thing, and it was grandparents that look after your children while you go to work. Grandparents were shielded, and grandchildren weren't allowed to see their grandparents. So what happened there? The women who were working were coming up against a brick wall because they had nowhere to turn to. So you know, post conflicts or post COVID-19, you know, past capitalism, let's start educating people on cooperatives. Let's start educating people that people are more important than a profit. And you know, making a profit is great. The co-op makes a profit every year, but guess what? The workers benefit from it. Why should we fucking line some rich man's pocket or rich woman's pocket with more profit for themselves while someone who is actually making that money for them is struggling to make ends meet at the end of every week? So I have so many things I would love to say about that, but we haven't got enough time.
We have something to add as well, because I don't want it to forget to add that obviously in a post-capitalist society, care should be a collective, you know, and there is a lot of feminist theories talking about that, how the ethics of care should obviously be something that is a tribe, and we were discussing that before. But because yet we don't live in a post-capitalist society, but we live under capitalism and against it. I've been thinking a lot about creating maybe a campaign, a specific campaign in my case, about trying to push the state, as Conor was saying, to create some policies that in Ireland is so fucking so behind other European countries, which are far from perfect. So a few friends, we have a group that we are so lazy to start doing something because we are very busy being parents and also working and also an activist, some of them. And we would like to do some evidence-based research and kind of a campaign to try to do better, as Alice was saying, work and family balance, you know. And something that we would like to the government is make sure that they make child sick policies a real thing. It's ridiculous that when your child is sick, you have to pretend you're sick yourself, which is a lot of cases. The most anxiety thing is when you're at work and you get a phone call from the crèche, your child is sick, and you literally don't know what are you going to do with it when you don't have family, which is in our cases. It should be a child sick policy. It should be flexible hours. It shouldn't be giving you a favor. Your company should not give you a favor to be flexible. It's your right that if you want to come back to work and you wanted to work 18 hours, 20, 25, the companies should facilitate you this, you know. And yes, they are a choice. Women have the choice to work at home, which is very respectful, and working outside home, which is very respectful. But I feel I don't want to choose. I want to have both. And it's my right. I want to work because it's my passion. And I also want to be present in my child's life. And I want to pick him up from school. And that's my right. And that should be given by the state to force companies that they are facilitating that. Parental leave is a joke in this country. That has to be up to the employers to decide whether they're going to give it. There are people who told me, no, you have to take the 4 months on a block. What are they talking about? Obviously men who are in management and they don't understand what it is. And that's, and another thing is national childcare. Oh my God. Like the cost of childcare here is ridiculous. It's the worst in Europe. And we have to nationalize childcare. It was already happening. We used to have community creche. Let's keep doing in working class communities and working and people, because that if there is no national childcare and obviously a basic income for everybody and wage work, but that's maybe further steps, that means that women will be free to choose to work and also being staying at home as parents. We should be choose. I don't want to give up my career. I love my career, and I don't want to give up my son in order to continue with my career. And I feel that that choice should not happen. It should be women should not give up their careers if they don't want to do it. If they don't want to do it, and that's the case for so many women. And unfortunately, so many women are forced to live outside the labor market because of childcare, which is being poor forever. And that will change with basic income, with lone parents until your child is 18, not 7. That's something of the Labour Party, which is completely alienated lone parents, which is mostly single women and migrant women. And that's why it's so intersectional. It's class, it's race, it's migrants, and it's also gender, of course, because the women are being based evidence research are more affected.
But then again, also if the care work is so important, why don't we share it with men, with fathers? That would be my postulate, why only one gender should be responsible for this care? And then we know, of course, for development, the kind of the emotional attachment is very important, but the emotional attachment to both parents, and then we know the fathers who care for the children, they have higher levels of oxytocin, which means that they have more empathy, and so on and so on. So they are actually it's good for them to care for their children. So why that's what I don't understand. Why the system is actually focused on the profit, on the work, not on the people. We should work around the needs of the children, of the elderly, of the society, not around the needs of the employers. Well,
it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to us, but it makes a lot of sense to some people. So it seems like a system that doesn't work, but it actually really does work. It works really well. Thank you. Connor, do you want to come in there just before we go to the questions?
Yeah, just some a very small points just to kind of add on to what kind of just what everyone else has been saying. That for me, just when I think about what a kind of post-capitalist society with an ethics of care would look like, I think our cities would look very differently straight away in terms of how they are laid out. I think transport would be completely different. They can design of buses would be kind of different, and then also it brings in care is not just for each other, but it's also in terms of the environment as well. So an ethics of care in terms of how we deal with land, biodiversity, farming, forestry as well. It's actually quite exciting what kind of having a care-centered ethics society would look like. It would change around. Would we live 30 miles from our jobs if it's a care-centered kind of society? To have that kind of flexibility in work, we would need to be closer to our jobs, which actually just makes kind of more sense. So then it brings in housing. How is housing kind of designed? That would then change. Do you have kind of common areas? In terms of this, instead of just having more and more kind of housing units on as much land. So even the spatial dynamics of our societies would fundamentally change, and for the better, if you had a more kind of that ethics of care at its center.
Thanks, Connor. There's a few questions from just coming in on YouTube. So the first one is around, do the speakers have any thoughts on how we can overcome the tendency to recreate patriarchal structures within activism and thus resist a leftist or post-revolutionary patriarchal society? So basically, that we're just going to recreate these same structures afterwards. So do people have any thoughts on that?
Jacinta, if I could just say that for the restructure, everybody's voice need to be heard. We can't go back to the status quo where it's a boardroom full of men in their black suits and their brown shiny shoes deciding what's right for everybody. Most of the millionaires sitting around the table. We need a society where the working class voice is heard, the woman's voice is heard, the migrant workers' voice is heard, and that going forward, everybody's needs are met in whatever way that needs to be taken, whatever agreement that needs to be taken. Everybody's needs have to be met, and everybody's voice has to be heard. We can't have people sitting in their mansions making decisions on working class areas or women or choices in childcare when they haven't got one fucking baldy idea of what's actually like to live in a working class area, living through troubles, living through strife, you know, trying to make ends meet at the end of every week, having worries about childcare, health, care and responsibilities. They are not the people that should be making these decisions. The people who are living through this stuff are the people that need to be making these decisions, and their voices need to be heard. So things like that need to be changed, and it needs to be changed dramatically quickly. We cannot go back to the status quo. We cannot do that. We have seen a pandemic go throughout the world and kill thousands and thousands of people. And we've seen the people who lifted up the shovel and the pike and the brush and go forward and keep working to keep the world turning. So they're the people that I want to listen to. I do not want to listen to the millionaires anymore sitting in their mansions and still paying their cleaner to come in, but as long as she wears a mask, or still paying their nanny to come in as long as she sanitizes their hands and keeps the whole house clean. I don't want to listen to them people anymore. I want to listen to the people that are keeping the world turning.
Thanks, Ali. And there's also, it's a kind of similar question, but there's also a question here around strategy. If people had any thoughts on strategy for this kind of work, this work of challenging capitalism, dismantling that kind of state power, and creating these different ways of being together. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, no, like, this is the real problem, I think, because of politics of care, women are burdened with this caring for others, which really literally do not leave you much time for being an activist. And I'm mother for 21 years now. And so I had my first son when I was quite young. And what I noticed is that I literally didn't have any time for any activism. That's it. Because once you become parents, you need to think of your children and you need to provide care, and it's a constant thing. So this is like, for me, it's, I don't have an advice, like, because
I mean,
that's it.
There are two topics. I mean, within radical circles, we have the same problems that in the world because we live in the real world, you know, and we are not, we're far from perfect, you know. So how many times meetings, I used to be an activist, quite active and present before I had a child too, because it's impossible to go on a Tuesday at 7 p.m. to go to a meeting to city center because
No way.
you're also wrecked, you know, and you can't, and a lot of reasons it's very difficult to organize. And I'm lucky I have a partner who I'm sharing tasks with, you know, and we are a team, but it's still harder. And sometimes you go to places, but I remember I was asked when the about housing conference in Unite, and my baby was 2 months old, and babies were not allowed to go there, so I couldn't translate because I was breastfeeding. He was 2 months old. It was a Friday morning, and I was not allowed for a trade union venue because babies were not allowed. I'm sure it was something with insurance. It's not their fault, you know. So obviously, that is things that they obviously have to happen. They have to change radically in every from us and from activists and from radical points of view too, and with co-ops. And but then obviously we can do campaigns based in grassroots. That's my strategy at the moment. Like if we can run this campaign, because there is no one single struggle. There are many struggles that if run by grassroots people who are affected by it, as Alice saying, not the people who are in the power, but the people who are affected by this, leading it and pushing it, which we are a lot of us, you know. In the other side, that could be a good start. In a post-patriarchal society, there is a lot of things about care that we haven't covered today because it's very complex and broad. That is, why is it carrying a women role is that socially constructed? And I'm a sociologist, so I would say yes. And why, like my 4-year-old plays with dolls and boobies, and that is weird on a boy. Why is that? Why is such a little girl's thing to do? Why are we taught since we are very babies that a woman has to be a carer and take care of babies, but not a boy, which is a good thing to be a carer. We can embrace it. But instead of saying a little girl can play with dinosaurs, who completely can, why not a man can play with dolls as well? And we embrace care as a good thing, as a positive thing, you know, and then they will be important in our society, you know. So obviously in a post-revolutionary society that I don't know if that's ever going to happen, all these concepts shouldn't exist under patriarchy, because they exist under patriarchy, you know. So it's very complex and it's very deep, and of course you need to decolonize collectively and individual, you know.
But it's not so simple.
No.
The issue is like I have a daughter, small daughter, and then she's self-socializing herself, because I'm not telling her that the girl should play with us and so on, so on. So it's kind of, but she prefers it on the basis of what other girls prefer, and so. Yeah,
that's okay. I'm saying that it is weird for a boy to do it, you know, in society in general, and that's because being as a carer that is a women's role since a very early age, you know.
I think we should start a campaign, because there is a campaign, women in STEM, and that's fine, but there is no campaign, you know, men in care or something like that. That's kind of like, why is that? That's really weird, you know. Like, we should empower men to to enter care professions. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Under neoliberalism, you see the strong female characters like Angela Merkel, Margaret Thatcher, all these right-wing women who are being portrayed as in a very masculine way. You will never see these women breastfeeding, you know, like you see the Zapatistas, you know, when you see them being very active or being mothers to and having babies and being collective, you know, and not giving visibility that they are carers, but also they're activists, you know, and it's possible both, you know. When we see representation of women in powerful positions, we don't see them having babies in their camera. We see them having, you know, it's like that's invisible, you know, obviously because it's other women doing that job.
No, but it's quite interesting, Leticia, because we don't have our children with us right now. So this is the thing. Like,
my reality will be not being able to have this talk because.
Yeah, and it shouldn't be a choice between being a mother or an activist. In the last few years, like I've been in activist spaces where it's quite normal for a woman to pick to breastfeed her child when she's facilitating a meeting, and I think it's brilliant. Like more of that.
Maybe it's easier when they're toddlers. It's very difficult, you know, to keep in a meeting, you know.
Yeah, true.
I did some activism when my son was a baby, but when he became more active and a toddler, it was really difficult to maintain sitting down, having a conversation about patriarchy when your child is trying to eat a cable, you know. I mean, it's hard. Like,
it's like for some adults in meetings as well, Leticia. It's like when you've got some adults in meetings as well, Leticia. They need put in their happy chair.
And I'm talking from my privileged point of view. I mean, I have lone parents that I don't know how they do it, you know, because it's extremely hard and isolated for them, you know.
Yeah, well, thank you, everyone. This was super interesting conversation. And yeah, I don't know. I don't think I really have to do much wrapping up. I think you've done a great job of that yourselves. But I suppose it kind of just talking about, I suppose, the pandemic times and the stage we're at right now. It kind of reminds me of there's a great writer called Rebecca Solnit, and she talks about how crises is something that, you know, the rich and the powerful really fear. And, you know, they fear the looting and they fear the rioting and they fear all the chaos. But actually, like, history has showed us around the world that periods of crisis and unrest, actually just communities and normal ordinary people, actually, this is time when people just connect with one another and mutual aid is at its best. And it's during times like this that actually people are at their best, because we need each other. And in times before and after crisis, that's the time that capitalism, and that's the time that has been constructed and been shaped for very specific interests and people. You know, that's the world of for that suits these specific financial interests. So it's times like now that there's potential for change, and there's a potential there to like buck the trend and to change how we exist, that is so wrong and is so oppressive and violent for so many people. So yeah, I just wanted to leave it there, and thank you so much for all our guest speakers tonight. Thank you, Connor and Alice and Teresa and Leticia and Anna. And thank you to Stacey and Lee and different people that are on tech tonight. And thank you everybody who has been watching and who has tuned in to this evening. We are going to have one more song here from Julie, and then we're going to say good night. So thank you very much.
Hi, thanks so much. It was such an interesting discussion, and I just really wanted to make a point as well of like how to like restructure society and veer away from patriarchal kind of like stranglehold on things. And I think it's like, it is an education, and it's about giving women power and educating them to become leaders, instead of like calling little girls bossy in school. You just say like, cool, you're a good leader, and also educating like kids to like understand the equilibrium of power and stuff. But yeah, give women power. that's how I think things change. But this is a song I actually wrote about being a woman. It's called The Art of Sacrifice, which I think is kind of apt as well. And I'm going to use a loop station, which I haven't done very much before, so hopefully this works. Yeah. I'm not safe, I'm dangerous, I'm sure, but you're not brave, you're running more and more, your head inside the sand, and yet you understand. It's plain as day to see that all you want is me. Ooh, 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 I've got more to lose than you do. Art of sacrifice is nothing new. I've got more to lose than you do. Art of sacrifice is nothing new. I've got more to lose than you do. Art of sacrifice is nothing new. Why so scared? Is it the mirror that I hold? The things that I can see scrolled across your soul. I'm not the only one to ever win your heart, but my name is written there, and it's been there from the start. Ooh, 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 I've got Art of sacrifice is nothing new. I've got more to lose than you do. Art of sacrifice is nothing new. I've got more to lose than you do. Art of sacrifice is nothing new.
Nice. That was beautiful.
Thank you. Thanks so much for the amazing conversation. It's really good.
Great. And we'll wrap up now, but I'll just let people know about our webinar next week. So we'll have more for the next few Thursdays. So the next webinar is on food sovereignty and farming. And our speakers for that, there'll be someone representing Talamh Bio, Future, and Sean McCabe, a researcher with Task. And for that webinar, so we'll be discussing food farming and the future of the agricultural system in Ireland, and kind of looking at some of the problems and the deep inequalities in our agricultural system, looking in Ireland, but also looking at the kind of global picture, and looking at how we can have a just agricultural system that works well for nature, for producers, and for all of us who need to eat every day, and kind of discussing what would food sovereignty look like in Ireland, and then how is our farming system dealing with the realities of climate change. And so looking at a food system that's led by land workers, and that puts community at its center. So again, we'll be here same time, same place. So you can join us again on the YouTube live stream. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add, Anya, or are we good? Okay. So again, thanks a million for all of our speakers, and thanks to everyone who joined us. And hopefully see you next week.